I'm happy to announce that we've released a joint communique by all 7 countries. We had some strong, firm conversations on trade and specifically American tariffs. I reiterated to President Trump that these tariffs threaten to harm industry and workers on both sides of our border. I stand ready to work closely with the President to resolve this dispute swiftly, but as I have consistently said, I will always protect Canadian workers and Canadian interests.
Okay, that...
Good God. What is going on?
Shocking!
So rude.
The Canadians, that is so typically Canadian. God!
What's wrong with them? Do
Actually-
they not know how to act on the world stage?
So when you say what's that a boot,
Yeah.
is that Canadian or is that like Minnesota?
All I know is it's really good
I don't
that
know,
there
but
are
whoever
people.
it is, the people up north are so rude.
Yeah. Thank God for people in the Trump administration. They know how to stand up to this.
Yeah, watch this.
Take a look.
Holy sh...
He really kind of stabbed us in the back. He really actually, you know what? He did a great disservice to the whole G7. He betrayed...
Trudeau did.
Yes, he did, because they were united in the G7. So they have this bilateral meeting. We were very close to making a deal with Canada on NAFTA, bilaterally perhaps, and then we leave and Trudeau pulls this sophomoric political stunt for domestic consumption.
There's a special place in hell for any foreign leader that engages in bad faith diplomacy with President Donald J. Trump and then tries to stab him in the back on the way out the door. And that's what bad faith Justin Trudeau did with that stunt press conference. That's what weak, dishonest Justin Trudeau did. And that comes right from Air Force One.
No,
stop.
So,
That's bad.
Anyway, we have with us to sort through what these Canadians, again, have done. I mean, if you ever have seen South Park or you saw John Candy and Canadian Bacon, you understand exactly what these Canadians have coming to them. In Washington, we have NBC News Capitol correspondent, host of KCDC on MSNBC, Casey Hunt.
On MSNBC.
Chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker. Editor-in-chief of the Atlantic magazine, Jeffrey Happy Goldberg. Also, senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Juan Zarate. He's a senior national security analyst for NBC News and MSNBC. So now, Jeffrey, that we have gone from Act 1 this morning at 6 o'clock was horror, shock, and, you know, Act 2 now we're trying to laugh a little bit about it.
Act 3 is building the wall between Canada and the United States.
Exactly.
Which is going to be a very expensive wall.
Very long wall.
Very, very long.
It's going to be, though, a beautiful wall, and let me tell you something.
With maple
We're going to
syrup
make the
taps in the
Canadians
wall.
pay for it.
Canadians are
But there will be taps in the wall, and Molson beer will flow.
And maple syrup.
Unabated, and maple syrup.
Individual
Molson.
taps.
Oh, good Lord.
Is Molson beer Canadian?
It's a little.
Molson is Canadian.
I think it is. Okay.
I don't know.
We got it.
We're looking at Peter.
All right.
You're like
Peter. What is
So I guess what really is so surprising is you have Justin Trudeau's very measured remarks.
Even by Canadian standards.
Even by Canadian standards, polite by Canadian standards.
Right.
And then you have Navarro and, my God, other administration officials coming out, Kudlow coming out and attacked, stabbed in the back, a special place in hell.
Right.
There was absolutely nothing in those comments. So what is it about Trudeau? We've been trying to figure this out. That turns Donald Trump into the largest snowflake to ever fall.
This is the melting Canadian snow.
To the ground of an international. I'm serious. If Donald Trump was offended by that, then he redefines the term snowflake.
Well, remember two things. One is, I mean, some of this is not that hard. Obama, very close to Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau, global progressive icon. Not that hard to understand where there would be structural resentment there on the part of Donald Trump. Number two, and this is a consistent aspect of Donald Trump's foreign policy thinking, allies can't be trusted. All of our allies are somehow or other
But Vladimir
ripping
Putin
us.
can?
Well, I mean, it's, you
Kim Jong-un can?
Adversaries.
I mean, isn't
but this
that
is the
Trump
thing.
thing?
Adversaries are given the benefit of the doubt, and we're going to find out tonight, our time tonight, tomorrow in Singapore. We're going to be listening to Donald Trump describe the leader of North Korea, which is the most murderous regime on the face of the planet. We're probably going to be listening to him describe the leader of North Korea in terms more gentle than the terms he used to describe
far more
the
gentle.
leader of Canada.
He's never criticized Vladimir Putin, but he's attacked Angela Merkel. He's attacked Justin Trudeau.
And family
He's
members
Angela Merkel
are
got her
Trudeau.
revenge with
She
that
did.
photograph.
By the way, if only Norman Rockwell were still alive today, that would be
That's almost
wonderful
Renaissance painting level photograph.
You think it's
That guy,
Renaissance?
the German state photographer should get a prize.
I think he will, or she will. So I'm just wondering, though, Jeffrey, is Donald Trump, and I mean this seriously, is he a mad genius? Is he a mad political genius? Picking these fights that do great damage to America's
Place in the
national
world.
security, but at the same time, hitting the conservative base right where they live, going against progressive Europe, going against progressive Canada, playing that card.
Maybe there's such a mad genius quality here that he's secretly trying to help Trudeau, because of course this is making the
God.
Canadian Prime Minister tremendously popular. This is good for Donald Trump's base. This is in some weird pro wrestling way a win-win for the two parties involved. Is there a kind of a genius behind this? The problem with the crazy Nixon approach to foreign policy. My leader's crazy. You don't know what he's going to do. You better give in. The problem is that there has to be a plan behind it, and there can't be an element of actual craziness in the operation of that plan. And so this is working without a net here, and the consequences are too grave for the risk that he's taking in terms of breaking apart the post-World War II international Western alliance.
Well, Peter, this is now the second president in a row that many foreign policy critics have gone after for not having an overarching international theme. Of course, there is no comparison between Barack Obama and Donald Trump in most aspects, but we quietly heard critiques, and I know Jeffrey did. I mean, Jeffrey had the most important interview probably of Barack Obama's on foreign policy, certainly in the second term. But what you quietly heard from a lot of Barack Obama's international critics was there was no overarching theme. It was just, as he famously said, don't do stupid stuff. But now we have Donald Trump that's taken that and turned it in Spinal Tap parlance to 11.
Yeah. This is the first G7 where there was more WWF than there was WTO, right? I mean, this is
I don't know how long it took you.
That was very good.
That was completely spontaneous. Totally spontaneous.
But it was worth it. Save that. Use that.
But the truth is, this is his doctrine. His doctrine is we have been shafted. The United States has been shafted for years, right? Whether it be trade, whether it be security, by our friends and our foes, doesn't matter. And it's America first. His definition of America first is they have cheated us, and I, and only I alone, to use his phrase, can do something about it. And the specific fact set, the specific substance of the dispute doesn't really matter so much as this idea that I'm going to stand up for us in a way that Barack Obama didn't. And you're right, it does, I think, play to a certain part of the American audience that's looking for a champion. If you watch his supporters yesterday, what they were saying is finally somebody is standing up. Okay, Canadians weren't necessarily high on the list for a lot of people, but it is the idea that we are standing up. Now, what is the other possible explanation here? The other possible explanation is he feels going into this meeting with Kim Jong-un that he needs to demonstrate strength, right? Their theory of the case is, now other people don't have it, their theory of the case is we're showing we are strong, and that will intimidate Kim into being more deferential to us. Other people would say he's shown weakness because he's cast aside allies. But I think the theory going on Air Force One at that point was we're showing strength.
So one, the central premise of Donald Trump's foreign policy, of his trade policy, is that the United States are suckers, that we've taken part in an international order since 1945, that has just time and time again hurt America. We have Steve Ratner on, and he's a bit of a chartologist. I have become a chartologist myself. I spent all weekend.
Where's your whiteboard?
Just as
Well, he's got it right here.
Just as Peter worked on the WWF, WWF, is that it? I worked on this chart. Mika will tell you I was up all night doing it.
Yeah.
But this is America's GDP post 1945. This camera right here.
Yeah.
Guys, you got to pick. Tell me what camera.
Right here.
I'm versatile. We're going to go to this one.
Okay.
Here we go. So here's my whiteboard. And there is something remarkable about this chart and this reality. If you actually go, and I would invite viewers at home to do this, look at the GDP of the G7 nations. Look at the GDP of China. Look at the GDP of everybody across the globe. This is not just from 1945 to 1973. This is from 1973 to 2018. That unlike any other country on the planet, America's GDP, even through 2008, has continued to go upward. It is the most breathtaking comparison of our economy versus Britain's economy versus Canada's economy, even versus China's economy versus Japan's economy. There is no other country who has benefited more since 1945. Anybody looking at this chart, looking at the real numbers, would look at America and go, oh my God, they have played us for suckers since 1945.
Well, I think the challenge here is President Trump, as Peter was saying, sees friends and enemies. We saw his tweet last night, all alike in this regard. They've been hammering the United States in terms of trade policy, not in terms of those numbers. Those numbers don't reflect, I think, Donald Trump's worldview on trade and foreign policy. It has to do with the hard traditional industries, manufacturing, steel, aluminum. Those are the things.
And mining. Like Donald Trump is obsessed on 1850,
I think there's a key part.
1850 technologies. The Chinese are working on AI. They're worried about 2050.
No, and you're identifying exactly the problem with this, which is I think we're missing the forest for the trees, which is you have a major challenge from China. Structurally, in terms of the economy, in terms of technology, 5G technology, AI, quantum computing, and frankly, we need our allies, we need the West to align, both in terms of trade, for all the reasons you've described, but also because there are real structural challenges from China as an alternative to the U.S. Western-based model. Admiral Stavridis earlier in your show was talking about this point, and I think that's a really important strategic element that's being missed here. Our friends and enemies aren't alike, and I think we're missing the point here. And I think the Trump administration is missing the opportunity to move from tactical leverage to strategic leverage on these trade issues.
And as we move from trade to North Korea, Richard Haass tweeted this analysis. Want your thoughts on it? The unraveling of G7 summit works in North Korea's favor, as real Donald Trump will not want to bust up two summits in a row, lest people conclude he is the problem. Increases incentive for Kim to up his asks and limit his compromises, and for Trump to do the opposite. Hardly the ideal context.
And Jeffrey, this is actually exactly what Donald Trump would want. He would want a deal with the North Koreans that would end with the denuclearization of North Korea and the removal of all U.S. troops from the Korean Peninsula.
Right.
He's talked about it.
Well, the Richard might very well be right, but he's doing the thing that we all do, which is analyzing Donald Trump's actions through the prism of how diplomacy and power dynamics usually work. Donald Trump might be impervious to that kind of analysis. In any case, you know, Donald Trump here, you could think of him as a very sort of in the bandwidth of normal presidential behavior. All presidents want big deals. Obama wanted the Iran deal. Jimmy Carter wanted a Middle East peace deal, as Bill Clinton. And Barack Obama wants his big deal. So he's already going into this looking for a success. He's, you know, the danger of any of these situations is that you have a president walking into the car dealership saying, I'm not leaving here without a car. And the car dealer says, great, we can make that happen for you. And so already structurally, this is Kim has won. North Korea has won this before it's even started. Which is that he's getting recognition by the President of the United States.
You know, Casey, what surprised me the most about Donald Trump, and I will admit that I have been completely blindsided on this front. I always accused him of being a Democrat, of being a liberal, always said that he would move. But I said, and in part because this is what he had told Mika very early on in the campaign, I'm going to win the Republican nomination, then I'm going to move so quickly to the middle, it will drive everybody crazy. What surprised me is he continues to see the world through this very small prism. And that is what I've always called the 33% of the most hardcore populist Republican base. And it seems this weekend is
To
fit
drive
right
his
into
behavior
that. And the
as well
question
as his policies.
is he expanding that 33% to 40%, to 44%?
Well, I think that's really, that is a question that he could start to answer here at this summit. I think, to Jeffrey Goldberg's point, if he is able to come back with something that he can sell, and Bob Costa touched on this earlier, that he can sell to the American people as a big deal, they're going to be willing to give him credit for that. Some of this other, the stuff that we're talking about every day, kind of aside. And I do think the major question here, and one, Zaratzi, I'm interested in your perspective on this. The president said he's going to be able to tell within a few minutes whether or not Kim Jong-un is willing to deal. And he is essentially putting all of his hopes and dreams on that one moment. And that is completely different from what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, it's a hyper-personalized form of diplomacy. In some ways, it's sort of the counter to the Obama administration, right? President Obama was criticized for not being personal enough with his relationships. This, in some ways, is the exact opposite, hyper-personalized. And I think the challenge here is the president willing to walk away? And he's tried to demonstrate that he's willing to do so, but is this summit too big a deal on the world stage for him to walk away? Can the United States continue to pressure with its maximum pressure campaign isolation, or as Jeffrey's described, is the summit really a window for the North Korean regime to begin its legitimation? We already know that he's being invited to Russia. We know that Bashar al-Assad will visit North Korea. Is this moment an opening for North Korea, regardless of what happens at the negotiating table? And so I think this is really a critical moment where we determine whether or not only can Donald Trump deliver on a big deal, but can we put a process in place that doesn't let North Korea out of the box too soon, and we get what we need, whether it's a year-long process or even longer, to actually verify whatever denuclearization plan is.
Well, Mika, we're talking about a guy who said, my instincts are great. I'm going to know the first minute I'm there.
Yeah.
Let's just step back a second and realize that this is the same guy who hired Steve Bannon, who hired Rex Tillerson, who hired Michael Flynn, who hired Paul Manafort, who hired McMaster, who hired all of these people that he then turned around and fired.
Right.
And many of them now indicted. Papadopoulos indicted and is pleading. Flynn indicted, charged, pled guilty. Manafort, more charges being piled on day by day. This is not a guy who should be trusting his gut instinct.
Well, you just
because
described.
the last year and a half have shown how bad his gut instinct is.
And you've seen in the last year and a half what a relationship with Donald Trump looks like, and you just named a few of them. That is what the relationships are, very short-lived. And you could take this from his concept of America first to a lot of people are now calling it America alone, to Peter Baker. Now I would think it almost looks like Trump alone. And you've got people mistaking Trump, it's almost like a Freudian slip, as a dictator because he's acting like one. And there's no sense to the moves he makes, except for how they play to the base. But in terms of his interpersonal relations on the world stage, it's nothing about America. It doesn't appear to be.
Well, I mean, to your point and to Juan's point, he walks into the summit in Singapore more isolated, and Kim Jong-un walks in less isolated, right? And the trick is, if you are a negotiator walking in thinking, what am I going to get out of this? What are the experiences you've seen in the last few weeks? One is that the G7 negotiators all sat down and they crafted a communique and they dealt with Trump's objections. Trump didn't want this phrase in, he didn't want that phrase in. Fine, we can make it work, we'll come together and we'll have and then the second it's all done, boom, he pulls the rug out from under. Same thing happened on the Iran discussions, right? Brian Hook from the State Department went to Europe and said, hey, what can we do to make a deal that will keep the Iran agreement in place but put more pressure on Iran? The Europeans gave on some of these things, and then suddenly the president says, no, I don't think this is nearly good enough. So if you're North Korea, the answer is the only person who matters is Donald Trump. because anybody else as a negotiator
Not America.
can't close the deal. And the only person who matters. So that's why you're starting this process at the top rather than the bottom, which would be the normal way you do it, because you might as well just get straight to the decision maker, because nobody else matters.
Jeffrey, does this weekend matter? Are we overplaying? Are we over analyzing what happened in Canada, or was it as bad as?
No, it's completely without. I think it's completely without precedent. This is not the way friends talk about friends in public. Really not the same way that people talk in private. I mean, the truth is that the Canadian-U.S. relationship has been one of the miracles of international relations. We have a 3,000-mile peaceful, open border with this country. They're a stable democracy. We're a stable democracy. At least we were a stable democracy for a long time. And to upend that simply for personal pique or whatever is motivating this, or the assumption that I'm going to get slightly better trade deal with this country. That's really unprecedented, and it's dangerous, and it's a signal to our other allies, South Korea, Japan, Australia, just talking about in the Asian context, that our president does not believe in stability. And that's important.
That's for sure. Juan Zarate, thank you very much for being on this morning. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Everyone else, stay with us. Still ahead on Morning Joe, an NBC News exclusive. We're learning a lot more about North Korea's reclusive leader from someone who knew him. What Kim Jong-un's former teacher is saying about the dictator today.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.